Black Lives Matter, an explanation of the movement. In 2012, 17-year-old Trayvon Martin was shot and killed by George Zimmerman. George Zimmerman was not a cop, but a neighborhood watch volunteer who claimed he shot Martin in self-defense. Martin was not armed, which means he did not have any weapons when he was killed. The next month, an unarmed black woman, 22-year-old Rakia Boyds, was shot and killed by an off-duty police officer. However, neither George Zimmerman or the police officer went to jail. After the deaths of Trayvon Martin and Rakia Boyd, 3 African-American women started the Black Lives Matter movement. One of the women, Alicia Garcia, wrote a post on social media with the hashtag Black Lives Matter. Protesters at marches started using the slogan Black Lives Matter on banners at protests. The hashtag Black Lives Matter moved from a hashtag to a movement during the summer of 2014. In July, an unarmed black man named Eric Gardner was suffocated by police officers on the sidewalks of New York City. In August, 18-year-old Michael Brown was shot and killed by a police officer in Ferguson, Missouri. Michael Brown was not armed. Again, the police officers who were responsible for the deaths of Eric Garner and Michael Brown did not go to jail. As 2014 came to a close, the tragic deaths continued. In September, 22-year-old Dorian Hunt was shot by a police officer who thought his toy sword was a real weapon. In November, a police officer shot and killed a 12-year-old boy named Tamir Rice, who was playing with a toy gun at a park near his house. The U.S. government does not keep an official count of shootings by law enforcement. However, an ongoing Washington Post tally identified that 93 unarmed people were killed in fatal shootings by law enforcement in 2015. Of these 93 victims, 40% were black, despite the fact that black people make up only 13% of the population. The hashtag Black Lives Matter has been used over 30 million times on social media. It is a social justice movement for racial equality. It calls attention to the deaths of unarmed black men and women by law enforcement and argues that these lives do matter. Systemic racism. Systemic racism is based on the idea that the United States has been a racist society since it was started. After all, slavery was legal in America for over 200 years. Africans were brought to America and branded with hot metal irons to show that they were people, property, not people. After slavery ended, life continued to be hard and dangerous for many black people. The KKK often killed and hung black people. In 1954, a famous song about African-American blues singer Billie Holiday sang about dead bodies hanging like strange fruit from trees. Because of the history of slavery and racism in our country, some people argue that America owes a debt to African Americans. They say that slavery is the reason so many white people were able to gain wealth or money and power. Powerful white Americans owe a credit to the families of slaves. These people say we should pay African Americans back for everything they have lost. Another part of systemic racism is that sometimes white people make money off of black culture. For example, white musicians will sometimes make more money using musical styles that came from black communities, such as jazz, hip-hop, and R&B. Just like the white colonists went to Africa and stole natural resources like oil and gold to make money, white musicians sometimes take the cultural resources of African Americans and use them to make money. White people try on different parts of African American culture like clothing and musical styles, but they don't experience the racism or pain that the black community experiences. Another part of systemic racism is where people live. Even today, black people and white people often live in different neighborhoods. Black neighborhoods are often poor and called ghettos. Sometimes white people take over poor black neighborhoods because the houses are cheap and then they improve the neighborhoods. This is called gentrification. When a neighborhood is gentrified, then poor people can no longer afford to live there. Critiques of Black Lives Matter. There are a variety of reasons that people disagree with or critique the Black Lives Matter movement. One critique of the Black Lives Matter movement is that it prioritizes black lives over the lives of people of other races. For instance, the former mayor of New York City called the movement racist, saying that the movement divides us. Another critique of the Black Lives Matter is that it unfairly targets police officers when there are only a few who are guilty of shooting unarmed black men and women. For instance, a sheriff from Wisconsin publicly critiqued Black Lives Matter by saying, "There is no racism in the heart of police officers." Some people agree with the message of Black Lives Matter movement, but they disagree with the way people are protesting. For instance, some supporters of Black Lives Matter have broken windows or started fires as part of the protest. Martin Luther King Jr.'s niece, Dr. Alveda King, said she thought that the violent tactics were inappropriate. Similarly, Mike Huckabee, a Republican politician who ran for president in 2016, said that the Black Lives Matter movement should be spreading its message by loving people and treating people with dignity and respect instead of magnifying the problem by starting protests that could turn violent.